Will Rowland here. Press subscribe for more videos similar to this. I first heard Ron Sims' story on an audio cassette over 30 years ago, and I was very moved by the story. I hope you enjoy it. God bless.
It's hard to talk about. I don't really know where to start, but right from when I was a child, one thing I was aware of, that lack of love in our home. My mum and dad was always arguing. My mum had a very violent temper, and from the age of about 5.5, 6, I can vividly remember being hit on many occasions. To the extent it wasn't just normal hitting, like we'd get a copper stick beaten over us, or a chair broken over our back, or kicked, or, you know, we got to the point where me and my sister used to be terrified to come in the house. There wasn't a day in my whole childhood that I can't remember my mother not ramping and raving about something, or watching her kick my dad about, and he would just stand there and take it. And from a very early age, I became to, you know, loathe, hate my mum, and also my dad, not because he wasn't a loving person. He was really gentle, but I detested him because to me he was just a coward letting a woman do that to him. I was very nervous before eventually when I became violent, but in the early days I was very withdrawn, very quiet, and yeah, my education was hampered, yeah, because I had mates at that time. Many of them were turned out to be villains and that. And I presumed that I was a big influence in their lives, but no, and I was to look at them. You take my cousin, we were mates from the age of about 10, 8 maybe. We used to go around playing together, we'd go around. And his mother would always But be loving to him. Even when we was 13 and 14, we used to smoke. You know, kids are not smoking. She would give him a fag or give me a fag and things like that. You know, I know she'd done some things that were wrong, but there's that loving and caring. She'd always give him sixpence in those days to go to ABC Miners. You know, the Saturday morning thing. Yeah. And I was never given that. Many times my mum would say, "You dig the allotment on that and do this and do that, and you'll get sixpence to go to pictures." But when I'd done all that, then I wouldn't get the money.
There must have been a time when you did have laughs.
Oh, yeah, I mean, from a very early age, I can remember thieving. I think that comes because, I don't know if you're looking for attention or you want the things that other kids have, but me and my sister would go in Woolworths and shoplift. I remember we used to play hooky at school, me and the fellas that I eventually become members of the gang. We would get our mark, and then we used to have to go across the playing fields to the woodwork shed. And we'd fall out and go into the toilets, and we'd leg it up over the toilet wall.
I'll get you for that one.
We used to have to go across the playing fields and away down to the old river, which we used to call the Black Dam, and we'd smoke and make dens and things like that. school attendance officers only around my mum's house, but that was just another ride and I could take it. I got to the point where beatings didn't bother me in the end. It even went on to that age when I was 13, 14. She was one of her rages one day, pulling out handfuls of my hair and beating me, and something snapped in me. And the next thing I knew, my mum was on the floor unconscious. I beat her back. First time I ever ate back. And that was a point in my life where I said, never again was anyone going to knock me around, abuse me. And that was the turning point. From there on, my shyness from school went. I would use my fist and settle all the problems. I become totally unruly. Teachers couldn't handle me. People couldn't handle me. And my first crime was when we broke into a rugby club. First of all, just for mischief, me and Jock, that's my cousin, the other guy I always used to went around with. We used to fight together back to back so we wouldn't get a bottle on the back of our head. And we spent our own life together before he was killed. And we were just wrestling about, and he slung me up against this club wall, and the door opened, and we went in there just to do a bit of mischief. And when we thought, oh, come on, let's have a laugh, we went into the first aid room, and we got out these scissors, and then we found the rugby players' shorts, and we just cut all the middle sections out and said, we'll let all that hang out when they go out Saturday, just have a giggle. And then we got the oranges and started firing the oranges around all that. And doing mischief in general, putting stuff in the boots and things like that, we thought would cause a bit of a giggle. And all of a sudden, just with no warning at all, this is how evil is. All of a sudden I started seeing my mum's face on light fittings, different things, and I just took an iron bar and something just snapped and I just leveled the place. And Jock was trying to calm me down, my cousin. He said, you've gone off the head, what's wrong? And we eventually left the place, but before we left, we just wrote our initials, Jock and Sammy, that was my nickname in those days, played hooky on such and such a day. So I didn't take the bill long enough to find out, put two and two together who'd done the job. And we went to court and I was on probation and found about 30 quid, and in the 40s that was an awful lot of money. It meant my mum had to pay it, it meant another beating.
And what happened after that?
Well, eventually I left school, but I got into trouble. I would go out Friday nights, I wouldn't come back into Monday mornings. I'd spend 2 and 3 days at a time in London. I didn't care what my mother said. I didn't care. I was beyond control, beyond up. She couldn't even control me at that point. And I always warned her, you touch me again and I'll kill you. And things got unbearable in the house. In the end, she just didn't bother. I would get involved with all manner of crime. I'd thieve, break into places, sell stuff. I was working on the railway at that time. I got involved. You used to get privilege tickets if you worked on the railway. It means you could travel third price. And I used to get these and flog them off to people. Other stuff I got found out about, lost my job. Many other crimes. Broke into a warehouse, stole loads and loads of stuff, and I would just go around conning people, go into shops and things like that and tell them that I was an insurance broker for a bankruptcy firm, or this was fire damage gear, and I would flog it that way. Eventually I met up with a young girl, and I got married at the age of 19. After 1 week of being married to her, I went to court, and obviously they found out about a lot of other crimes. One of these crimes involved a large amount of whiskey, alcohol and cigarettes, thousands and thousands of pounds worth. And I ended up in court with all members of the gang, about 20 of us. And when the magistrate started sentencing, it started off with fines and probation. And when it got to me and Jock again, it was down to Winchester for medical reports. And the report came back, these men are too violent, they've got to go to prison. And off I went to Lewes Prison in Sussex at that time, and that was the hardest YP, young people's prison, in the country. I became an animal to survive the jungle. Now, it didn't improve me, it made me worse. And I really generally wanted to go straight, but my wife wasn't interested in that. She's very irresponsible. She married from what I was. As much as I'd tried, see, I know now that to get out of that position, I should have got out of Basingstoke, got out of the town where I was born, got away from the environment. And in those days, when you come out of prison, you used to have a national insurance card, and all the weeks it never had a stamp, it'd have HMP, or Majesty's Prison, so everyone knew where you'd been and you couldn't get a job anyhow.
Ron, I believe you started a small business.
Oh yeah, first of all, it was the construction. I used to subcontract and do curb laying and things like that. I still had all my mates working for me. And I used to do many hours work and generally work hard. But somehow things used to just go wrong. It seems that everything was just, every time I tried to go right, things were stacked against me. Yeah, eventually I got led back into crime to keep my family together. And again, I went into prison. This time it was Winchester. I'd done a 9-month spell in there. Met up with all kind of criminals, and most of what I was doing later on in life, I learnt the trade in there. And I came out, and again, I was determined to go straight, wanted to go straight. I had a paint and decorating business then. On a number of occasions, my wife would leave me. And I used to wander around the streets with one baby in the pram and 2 on the handles. Even an animal don't desert its children. And in the end, I knew what had happened to me. And I remember one night I come home from work, because I used to get up early hours in the morning, put the kids into nursery, to school, go to work, come home, do the washing, and I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And one night I come home, the welfare were there, and they said, "We've come to take the kids, you can't go on like this." And I just blew my top, and but eventually my wife came back, we got them back, and I planned to murder her this time. I used to just scream and said, "This can't be happening to me, this isn't happening, it's just a bad dream. I'm going to wake up." I just could not believe this was happening to me.
Was there anyone who you felt could help you?
Nobody. It turned to drugs. Yeah, I was on Seconal sodium, Amytal sodium, other drugs, just enough to just block it out. I mean, many times I almost killed myself. Many times I'd be taken in to be pumped out, things like that, for a drug overdose. Yeah, I planned to kill my wife for a start, because I knew she was going to clear off as soon as I tried to go straight. My kids were going to go in, and I just wanted to keep my family together. And I dug a hole under a bottle of pigeon loft, and I was going to murder and bury her there. 2 days before I did that, she went. Otherwise I'd done it. But what really made me sure that I was never going to get involved in that kind of crime again, I remember when she came back again, and to keep my family. You see, people say, if you were such a hard case, Ron, why do you let a woman treat you like this? You say, I loved her. I don't know if people can understand that. And above all, I love my children. And they were my life, and if it meant I had to go to hell for them, I was prepared to do it. I didn't care about what people thought of me. I didn't care what I appeared. As long as I had my wife and my family, I was holding on to desperately to what, to me, was the only thing that mattered to me in my life. And yeah, and I was on top of this roof pulling a job off with a mate in a bigger estate. We was going to take all the lead off this roof, thousands of pounds worth. And whilst we were doing this, car pulled up with 2 plainclothes blokes. The first thing that went into my head, detectives. And I picked up the axe and I said to my mate, the first police comes through that door, I'm taking his head off. I mean, I was that vicious, I would have killed them. But by the grace of God, there were 2 estate agents looking over the property. And when I realised how close I'd come to murdering a policeman, I said, no way, that was enough. And I decided from there on I was going to go straight, yeah.
When you decided to try and go straight, how did it actually work out?
Every time there was a crime in my, obviously I was the #1 suspect. And I would keep telling them I'm trying to go straight, but I would go on ID parades. And in the end, yeah, I was approached to be an informer. If I did, it would prove to them that I was going astray. And I agreed to be an informer, and that's a statement to say that's the lowest, that's the scum you can become, to be an informer or a grass, that you can't go no lower than that in the criminal world. But again, to keep my family together, I believed, you know, I was listening to what these people were saying. So to prove that I was trying to go straight away on the inside, and this bloke got set up, they made a raid. When the raid went through, I was allowed to get out the back door. This bloke was charged, sentenced to prison. There was only one thing wrong. My wife informed his mates on what I'd done, so they were out to get even with me, obviously. Because of my reputation, they knew that if you're going to get Ron Sims, you better kill him, because if you don't, he'll get up and kill you. And probably it's my reputation that kept me alive, but they informed the police on many jobs that I'd committed over many periods of years.
So really, you ended up in a worse mess?
Yeah, they sent me down to appear before Lord Justice Roscoe at the Winchester Quarter Sessions with a recommendation that I serve between 3 to 5 years preventive detention, which would mean Dartmoor. I knew that if the guys in prison found out I was an informer, I'd been a dead man inside minutes. And then I heard my wife was going to divorce me. And I tried to kill myself like many blokes do, as many people kill themselves in prisons. You see, I got so desperate at one point in that hospital block, in that cell, that I remember dropping to my knees one night and just screaming out in desperation that if there's a God, you know, please help me. But yeah, a miracle happened. I came in court miraculously. This policeman got up and said that I'd been working for them. I mean, the judge looked at me, he said, I'm going to give you a chance. You got 3 years. And I thought, well, 3 years, I'll get through there. But then he said the word probation, and that was a miracle. Within minutes, I was outside, free. And I'm back home where I started with my mum. And I had a big chip on my shoulder. You know, my mum had abused me. My first wife had abused me. And I decided then from there on, never again would I ever trust a woman. Would ever a woman use me? From now on, I would use women.
At what point did you meet your second wife?
I went to work at a school. I used to coach them in football. And it was whilst I was there that my wife came through for a job. Now, I had nothing to do with women for 2 years. I didn't want to do it. But this young girl came in, blonde hair, mini skirt. I mean, the kids were saying, wow. She was actually married. She had a bad marriage. We seemed to have a lot in common. And we went away together. But it was mostly for company. I mean, I thought she was attractive in that. And I suppose in my own way, I loved her to a certain amount. But as I said before, I had one foot on the bank, ready to pull myself. Never again was a woman going to use me. It was whilst I was working on the motorway that I got involved with a gang from London. Were involved in supplying pornography and movies and such as that. And yeah, I used to go up to London every week in a van and bring out a van loads of stuff of pornography. Drugs, pornography, and that all go together. And my mate at that time was a drug dealer, and I was taking drugs myself, smoking marijuana. So was Maureen. Maureen didn't want nothing to do it. You know, I used to get her and just smash her in the face, chuck her through the door and say, if you don't want to know it, because obviously she wasn't brought up into that kind of upbringing, and she didn't want nothing to do with it. And I would just abuse her and chuck her out and say, you either get involved or you can go and you can take the kids with you. That's how evil I became. I'm not trying to be a sloppy customer, but she was so in love with me that she would dive me. She just got involved in the pornography and the drugs, and I physically, mentally, spiritually, and morally totally destroyed her. If you saw come on one Friday night, as per usual, cocky, load of mouth, money everywhere, and as I come through the front door, I collapsed, blood shot from my nose. I screamed with pains in my chest. I was rushed to Basingstoke Hospital, and that's where I suffered a massive heart attack at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I remember it. I could see them hit me with electric irons, putting needles into my arm. I was queued up onto a heart thermometer. I remember the doctor saying, we're losing him, he's going. And I thought, what are they on about? I'm going, I'm alive. I was frightened and imagined they were going to cut me up, and I was still alive. But in fact, I died in for a couple of 3 minutes. Within an hour, I had another heart attack, and I was put into a side ward in the recovery ward. Wasn't expected to live, and that's when a nun came in, and she said to me she had a vision that Jesus was calling me for something special, and that I wasn't going to die. Besides laughing, I swore at her and told her to get on a bike and get out of the ward. But 9 days later, I left the hospital. And in fact, I was given a pension of £70 a week, and more or less told to go home, take it easy, and wait to die.
Your lifestyle changed, Ron. How did you fill your days?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to go back to work, but that was impossible. And it was whilst I was down the Cub-Up once, I struggled down there, talking to him a bit about football and encouraging him, where I see this bloke running around on the floor. He never had no dog collar, just an ordinary bloke. And I was introduced to him, this Reverend Trevor Jones of the local Baptist church. And we got chatting about things, and what I loved about this bloke, I always thought these vicars talk with a plum in their mouth and talk down to you. But this bloke was talking to me just ordinary, on the same level, no dog collar. And I said, well, you don't wear a dog collar. He said, no, I don't leave it. I don't need a dog collar to prove I'm a man of God. He says, well, you know, you knew the man really lived his faith. And I could see, you know, it's funny how an old villain can see honesty. And, you know, when you go into prisons, first thing they do is size you up, and they know if you're conning them or not. And you can't con an old con, you know. This bloke wasn't conning me, he was genuine. And he said, I would like to come down your house and talk to you again. Or I remember when I came home, I started humming this song, Jesus loves me, this I know, because the Bible tells me so. And that was when I was a kid in the Salvation Army. A kid of 8, I'd learnt that. And all of a sudden, you know, it was back. And this morning thought I'd gone off my head when I told her about this minister was coming to my house. But she said, you know, whatever makes you happy, that's fine. Chopper says he'll be round for about quarter of an hour back to home. That's the minister from the Baptist church. Where do you think of that now? Come to see me. All right, Trev. Yeah, better late than ever, mate.
Yeah, that's right. Good to see you, Ron.
Yeah, this bloke come and see me, and he taught me about the Lord, told me about the prodigal son, told me a lot of things about Jesus, said that he believed that God was calling me for something special.
Jesus and what he can do for you.
Yeah.
Right. Now, do you really think he's interested?
No, not really. Not in a black. You know, I used to go to Sunday school when I was a youngster, but the state of my life, I wouldn't think God could forgive me for what I've been doing.
Well, I mean to say that he can.
And, that didn't sink in. But he gave me a load of books. Give me, you know, your usual track stuff, you know.
Obviously was a long way from the Lord at one point. He did a lot of things that were wrong. But, in fact, he met Jesus in prison, and Jesus forgave him and changed his life.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying to you is, he can do the same for you. What about it?
And he went, that night, me and Maureen went to bed early. And I started the route looking through this literature, give me, you know, your usual track stuff, you know, Jesus loves you, Jesus is the good shepherd, and I was just throwing them away, you know. Then all of a sudden, like, what he did was put a book there, and this book had a fist with a chain around it. And it was a true story of a guy like me, Brian Greenaway, Hell's Angels. Now he met with Jesus in prison. And I read this story, and you know, I couldn't believe what I was reading. He'd been a bloke like me, been through much of the same thing like me. He was in prison serving 5 years for malicious wounding 2 people. And how Jesus had come to me, we know we've heard lots of stories about guys who had visions of Jesus, or Jesus come to them in prisons and told them that above all, not only was he conned, but they could be forgiven. You know, and I was reading there about a man who died for me, that I could be forgiven. I couldn't believe it. And next to me was Maureen, that I'd almost destroyed. She hated me. And my family, my boys next door, they didn't have 2 oots for me. And I was dying, and I deserved to die. And I just read this book about, not only had Jesus come to Brian Greenaway in prison and forgiven him, but he went on to become a minister. And right to this very day, he's still part of the London City Mission going into prisons. And I thought, that's no good, I'm dying, and God couldn't use me. But all I knew that God was saying something to me, I need you. And I just said, okay, God, if you're for real, you can have me. And I knew I'd been saved. I mean, for the first time in my life, I really cried for Ron. It hurts now, but can you understand that I knew I'd been forgiven? All the hate I went through and all the hurt seemed to just drain out of me. And I looked at Maureen and I just cried even more, and I said, God, why did you allow that? Why did you allow my mum to hit me? Why did I go to prison? Why did my first marriage break down? Why did I get involved in this muck? Why did I do this to Maureen? You know, etc., etc. And I know I heard Jesus say deep in my heart, I allowed you to live in that evil world. Now I want you to go out and show it, God. First thing happened, I got up in the morning and I said to her and the boys, we're going to church. And they all thought I'd gone completely crackers by now. But we went down to the local Baptist church. You can imagine what they thought when they seen me walking in there. But that was the start of it. Next thing I said, we got to go and knock the doors. And the minister said, you what? I said, we got to knock the doors everywhere in Hartley, Whitney. I want everyone to know that I thought I was the first guy that found this Jesus. And I don't think he'd done it out of loyalty because he felt God was done. I thought he'd done it more out of fear because we were on the same as us. But we went round the doors in Hartley, Whitney, and told them about Jesus. The change in me was so much that within 6 weeks, Maureen said to Trevor, I don't know what's happened to Ron, but what's ever happened to him I want. And she gave her heart to the Lord. And then eventually my whole family, my 3 boys, gave their heart to the Lord. And this old house is just on fire for Jesus. The most evil, rotten thing, terrifying thing ever happened in my life was prison. I now go back into prison with a Bible. Telling the guys now about Jesus, what he's done for me. And you've seen some of the stories that are on the letters. I'm seeing hundreds of men in prisons all over this country coming to Jesus. And they're not freak. It's not a freak story. Not only as prisoners, but prison officers, prison governors, prison staff are coming to know Jesus as well. And you know, I'm also a member of the Christian Police Association. You understand that? My sworn enemies, men that I wouldn't have thought about killing before, I now go around with chief constables. Let's weigh it up. I could be out in that world making a fortune. Why do I want to sit here? Why do I go around churches? Why do I write? Why have I written this story? Why am I don't travel 400 and 500 miles to go into a prison and to go back in the hell that I've just come out of, to relieve that clanging and banging of keys, to tell a story that's just a load of, just a joke. The most thing, best of all, you know, I'm getting really excited, as you can see. You know, what I love Jesus about, most of all, I can love somebody, you know. Not only do I love Jesus most of all, but I love my wife. And she loves me. Yeah, we've done some rotten things to each other and with other people. But you see, when anyone's in Christ Jesus, they're new creations. Old things have passed away. Behold, new things have come. And Ron's a new person. Maureen's a new person. Yeah, outwardly we're the same, but inwardly we were changed. We love each other.